Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Whole Picture, where we chat with your favorite entrepreneurs and creatives about their passion projects, hobbies, and the deep interests, the things that keep them in the game for the long term. We are here with Kimberly DiPersia, who is the artistic director of All the Line Studio and Incubator. She recently had her short film Saving Cycle premiere at Sunscreen Film Festival, and it was nominated for the Best Florida Film, which is so freaking cool. So welcome, Kim. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you and I met, I don't know, was it a few years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, working on some projects together. And since then, I have seen you go from like, working behind the scenes on some things to like having this big vision for all the line. And I want to kind of get into all of that. But first, just tell me a little bit about like, how you got into the arts to begin with. Like, was this something you always wanted to do, or like, how did you get into the creative space?
I mean, I think I was always a creative child. I was always, singing or making up stories, reading a lot, writing a lot. And growing up, I watched my grandfather perform in community theater. So when I was in elementary school, he was in the many different productions like Fiddler on the Roof, Sound of Music, Carousel, Arsenic Old Lace. And he was always like the lead or like a scene stealing character, and I just fell in love with the theater, and I was like, I want to do that too. So I started, studying acting and, taking acting classes when I was a kid. And then when I was in high school, I did the Young Company, which at the Orlando Shakes down here in Orlando.
Mm.
And it's a high school program. They still have it going on, where you do a Shakespeare play during the summer. It's kind of like a really fun, cool summer camp. And it was during that I thought, oh, I want to do this for the rest of my life. This is amazing. I love this.
Yeah.
So I went to college at NYU Tisch and studied acting. And then, when I came out, I did a lot of classical theater. I really focused primarily on acting. But I think there was an upward trend of starting to produce one's own work, especially when it came to web series, short films, all of that. So I got together with a group of friends and we started creating various projects together. And through that, I started shifting from being an actor to being a producer. And I found that not only did I have a knack for producing, I also just really liked how empowering it was, because as an actor, you're kind of at the end of the totem pole, right? You're waiting around for projects to happen, waiting for the phone to ring, someone please cast me, that type of
Yeah.
thing. When you're producing, creating a project, you can helm up your own vehicle for yourself. You can say, I'm writing something I'm going to star in, all of that, and you really take ownership. And then also, when you're producing projects that you might not be acting in, or you have more of like a behind the scenes role, um, it's just a different way that people perceive you in the industry. And I think for me, it was a like a breath of fresh air from being
Mm.
like on the bottom of the totem pole to suddenly like you're the one that is calling the shots. That people are like, "Wow, thank you for putting this together. This is amazing."
Yeah.
So I got more and more into production. I started working in the production offices at like Netflix, Showtime, NBC Universal, Amazon, working on projects, film and TV, working as a production secretary. So you're kind of like in the hub. And when I started that job, um, the production coordinator was like, you're going to learn everything about production because that production office touches every single department.
Yeah.
So I spent about 2.5 years working in that realm. And then as I was working, I looked at everyone kind of above me and I was like, wow, everyone's working longer hours and they're more miserable. Do I really want this life? And so I took a break from that and I was like, I really just want to do more freelancing and more acting stuff again. And so it just kind of shifted into doing more independent projects and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think, long story short, I'm down here in Florida, and really looking, there's such a creative industry here, and so much potential, but a lot of it's unrealized. There's a lot of things that, I mean, personally, I think the state could be doing with like tax credits to build more professional productions coming in. But right now, there's just this growth of independent film and growth of independent artists. So I've been working to cultivate that with all the line, with various projects and lots of things, which we'll get into. But that's a
Yeah.
long roundabout way. I think I
Yeah.
answered your question.
Totally did. Yeah. I'm curious because I had a similar path, but it like I came in kind of as an actor and then was like I enjoy it, but I also have this, as you said, a knack for the behind the scenes stuff. And part of it is just that's my corporate job. It has been like project management and stuff, so it just naturally was that. But part of it is I did like what you said, like about the empowerment piece of it. And I'm curious how have you navigated like the identity aspect of it? Because I've struggled with like being like, I'm an actor. Well, no, I'm a producer now. Oh, I'm this. And I kind of have struggled with like how to present myself or how to like describe myself as I'm networking. Has that like come up for you in this transition at all?
100% because I wear many hats. Like, I mean, if I went to someone and I listed everything I did upon I'm an actor, I'm a writer, producer, director, editor. I mean, I wear many hats. So it's like a lot filmmaker. Like there's so many different things. So I kind of, say overarching that I'm a multi-hyphenate filmmaker because there's just so many aspects to it. That it's tough
Yeah.
because on one hand, you get seen a certain way. So if you're like, all right, I'm a producer, I'm a filmmaker, you're not going to get like people act knocking on your door like, hey, do you want to act in things? But then if
Yeah.
you're an actor, then you don't have that like value, like esteem.
Yeah.
People see you differently. So it is a challenge. Um, but I think in general, I just kind of go for the overarching filmmaker because that encompasses a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I've kind of ended up there and then kind of, and I also find myself like struggling to know what to focus on and when, like I was like, okay, I'm gonna go learn all there is to know about producing. And as I was doing that, I was like, oh my God, I haven't been on set in a year. And then I like switch and I'm like, I haven't been on set. And so now or as an actor, I mean. And so now I'm, here and I'm like chasing these opportunities and I'm like, then I hit a point of frustration where I am like, I'm auditioning, I'm gonna go make my own thing, and I'm back in producer world. Have you navigated that as well?
I think it's an ebb and flow. I think it definitely I find myself in waves where I am more production heavy or I am more producer heavy and then, getting to or I mean, I think it just kind of comes with what's available, what's on
Yeah,
your palette for things. But I do think that no matter what you're doing on a set, whether it's acting, directing, gripping, location managing, PAing, you're gonna learn something about that. I mean, I think a lot of my producing skills came from being on set as like an actor, as a background actor, as a PA, even just looking around and like watching and observing and seeing how things are done. So I think no matter what position you're in, and that's also part of like the idea of all the line is that like all positions on a film set or TV set or whatever are important and contribute creatively and collaboratively. So I think you can learn wherever you're at. So no matter what you're doing,
yeah,
have that other eye of like watching and learning as you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Tell me a little bit about All the Line in terms of like because you can produce your own work and just have your own company, but you All the Line has a much bigger vision than that. So tell me a little bit about the vision and how you kind of came up with that.
Yeah, we kind of the way we call all the line, it's an independent film production company on a mission to change the paradigms of the industry for the better. And one of the things, many of the things that I observed while being an independent filmmaker, working in, network television and studio production, um, a lot of the things I kind of rolled into the creation of All the Line. For instance, when you're being a filmmaker, it's very lonely. Like you're kind of making projects separately and you kind of have your little thing and then you're done and then you move on to another project. And instead of and my solution with that was all the line is we're creating a community. So we have like a collective of members that work on different projects. And we just kind of grow and grow. I mean, right now we're at like over 70 people that at least that are part of the collective, that we've collaborated with. So we have a growing group of people that you can trust to pull in on projects. Um, and you don't feel like alone. There's a group. You're not like an island just kind of making things separately. I think also the idea of fluidity. So especially when you get to more like network studio jobs, you kind of fit your little peg, right? And you kind of stay there. So like you work in locations and you work your way up, and that's kind of, maybe you get to be a unit production manager, or maybe you can get up to be a producer, but you're working in props. You're kind of like, maybe you can be a you kind of get in a track and you get set there. And sometimes that's exactly what people want. But I find, especially with independent filmmakers, you have so many different hats that you wear. And so the idea of all the line is to allow that fluidity. So yes, you're an actor, but you want to be a director, or you want to learn about gaffing, or to create that kind of parallel movement, that not parallel, but all over the place movement, that
Yeah.
fluidity between positions, departments, that people can grow and have that openness to be involved in and take challenges and risks and learn from things.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we also do that is we have ongoing workshops with our members. So learning about gaffing, screenwriting, acting,
Yeah.
hair and makeup. So for instance, like there's so many different things that people get kind of an idea, a flavor of, where they're like, oh, maybe I'm inspired to learn this. And at the moment, there are a lot of like 101 workshops where you get kind of the basics. I'd love to eventually expand that into more detailed workshops as well.
Yeah. I think it's so cool because Steven and I talk about this often where there's kind of like the corporate track of being in the filmmaking world, and then there's like the entrepreneur track. And the corporate is like what you're describing, where it's like you're like in the vertical of locations or props or hair and makeup, and that is like the corporate ladder in a
Mhm.
sense that you're just working your way up. And what you're describing and like what we've kind of found ourselves in is this entrepreneurial mindset where it's like we're building a ship together, and like I'm good at this, but I also want to go learn this, and like rising tides type of mindset. So did you set out to create that because you saw the environment, or did it kind of start to come naturally because you saw, these projects that you were working on, you wanted to bring more and more people into, and it naturally evolved?
I started out with that idea. So I'm pretty happy that, we've been able to kind of go along that track with that general idea. And our collective members have really embraced that, being able to, one of our short films this past spring, was a first time female director, who started, actor, writer, and then
Yeah.
now she's directing a short. So to really see that in motion, we had another person who was a gaffer who then jumped into cinematography, which that's a little more fluid, but
Mhm.
just being able to see, someone that might not have any skills as a screenwriter slowly develop that over time, and then suddenly now we're greenlighting their short film that they wrote. So it's cool to see the cultivation and growth.
Yeah.
And I think, because the thing is, you don't really know your skills for something unless you delve in and go for it,
Yeah.
right? Unless you try. If you're just sitting on the sidelines, you don't know if you're good at it or not.
Yeah.
And I think, you can there's a lot, like, you can go to, if you study at like a film school, you're going to be able to like get all that comprehensive knowledge, because typically a good film school, you'll be working in different positions, learning about that. When you do like your thesis film, when you do thesis films, you'll be crewing up on all different things. So you'll learn that. But if you're an independent filmmaker that, maybe has switched gears from like you were an actor, now you're this, and you're kind of like learning as you go, being able to go in different positions and kind of be able to explore and find that is something that we're cultivating through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that what you're talking about is such a necessary part of like creative growth too, because there's something that I've realized like as I'm kind of stepping into different roles that like I haven't been like new at something in a while, because like my career, like I've done it for 10 years now. I've been writer for 10 years as on the corporate side of things. And so I like it's natural to me. And when I stepped into producing or I stepped into screenwriting, I was like, it's different and I'm new at it. And that has like I've found that in my best moments, that has made me more creatively available because I'm like, there's a part of my brain that is like hasn't been used in a while of like learning something different. And so I think what you're doing there is so cool because I do think that that makes people more engaged in a way when they are looking and things become possible for them again.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the idea of the fixed mindset versus growth mindset,
Yeah.
right? And I'm very much a growth mindset person. I'm always challenging myself and growing for things, seeking new challenges. Like it's like, oh, like it's almost uncontrollable
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, wow, why am I doing something? I'm doing something challenging and new every single day, it feels like, which
Yeah.
which is exciting. Sometimes I'm like, what am I getting myself into?
Mhm.
But then on days where the rarity where I don't actually try something new, I'm so bored
Yeah.
with that. I just think, if you have a growth mindset, like filmmaking, creative, entrepreneurial stuff is just, you're gonna flock to it because that's such a core component of it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the incubator side of things. 'Cause I know you have next steps and all that. So talk a little bit about like what that side of it is.
Yeah, so yeah, it's all the Line Studio and Incubator. And the incubator is designed as developing and kind of yeah, incubating, like for instance, work. So we have our Next Step screenplay series, which is a monthly staged reading of an original feature-length screenplay. So we stage it with actors. It's kind of a mix between a reading, a staged reading, a theater show. Like we have music,
Yeah.
sound effects. Our actors have been rehearsed, but they're still on book. And and then we put it in front of an audience, and we have a Q&A with the screenwriter. So it's like a workshop slash performance.
Mhm.
And so that's was designed. I mean, it was initially, and you were in the inaugural production of it. I had written a feature length screenplay, and I was like, I want to workshop this. I want to like get this up on stage. I want to, have actors read it and kind of like showcase this. So I put that together and it went so well that I was like, oh, let's do this with more scripts. And we've kept it going. I mean, we're coming up on 2 years of doing this, almost every single month except
Oh my
for
gosh.
December. We don't do December because it's like around the holidays.
Too
It's
much.
just really
Yes.
tough. But we've been able to really generate, and the idea is you write a feature-length screenplay, terrifying to create, to produce, right? It's so big. How do you get it made? So much money, so much effort, all that stuff. A lot of people just write it and then it just kind of sits, and doesn't do anything. It collects dust.
Yeah.
Next step is the next step, right? From writing it to getting it produced. It's giving it that like little first boost toward that long journey of doing that. And the goal is to, eventually produce a lot of these as feature length films.
Yeah.
And so like we have one film, one screenplay, The Bridge at Midnight, which we're working on getting that produced as our first feature length. So yeah, it's just, workshopping that. And then we also get to see like what works, what the audience likes. You get to see like what actors shine in what roles. It really brings it to life, and and just gives it, this creative life and an opportunity for, the further steps along the journey. But I've also found with the incubator, it's also about incubating talent, and individuals. So like the workshops that I mentioned, just cultivating, encouraging members to create, produce, step up. For instance, right now we've opened up a development pipeline for our collective members to pitch us projects, and go out and produce their own works. And we actually have several projects that are in this development pipeline. Everything from starting to raise funding to being greenlit and going through production. So to really open that up and to be a resource, not just as kind of like like an umbrella, like we have with our resources, our connections, our collective, all of that, but also our guidance and kind of expertise to kind of help the next generation, the next group of producers out there as well. So it's a constantly evolving term of incubator, and I
Yeah.
like it because um a lot of times you just have a production company and they're just like, all right, we have this, we're going to make it, we're going to film it. And you don't have the development. And like studios out there have development, they have projects, but this it creates this like in-house development of works
Yeah.
that we just have this, so that, like let's say there's someone that's like, all right, I really love all the line. I want to give you like a blank check to make something. What do you have? We can be like, we have all these scripts that we have workshopped in Next Step. We also have like live streams that we filmed. Like you can watch the live
Mhm.
stream. Here's the script. Here's all of this. Um, we also have short films. We have so many other things that we're just building this repertoire of works ready to be developed, ready to, that they're there in that development pool to be greenlit.
Yeah. It's very cool. And what are you finding like as you are, having these people pitch you and you're like starting to develop all these works, like what are you finding in terms of like this is working really well when we're doing this? Like, like obviously feedback is fantastic, like you're doing it in front of a live audience, but like what's being beneficial in that growth and development stage, if a writer is listening to this or an actor is listening to this, like how can set themselves up in that phase?
I mean, I think it's definitely learning what works, right? Particularly with like Next Step, you have your script, what people are laughing at, what
Yeah.
characters, we had a script this past January and they killed off a character and people were like angry that came to the show. They're like, why'd you kill that character off? And so like that writer gets that feedback of like knowing, oh, this resonates with people, like this didn't resonate. They really like
Yeah.
this character, they laughed at this moment. So you just get that audience feedback, and I think uh just as an actor you get to develop, roles and like play with things. And
Yeah.
we've had a lot of of particular instances where we've cast an actor, in like a small role, um being like, okay, like, we see their potential, but we haven't really worked with them that much. And then they like really shine, and then we're like, wow, okay, let's give them more and more and more. And I mean, it really is, there's no small parts for actors. And I don't think a lot of actors, not as many actors out there realize this as I would like them to, is that, if you get a small part in a show or a film or something, that's a great sign. Like just because you're not the lead or just because you're not like a leading part, that's an opportunity for you to throw everything into that and really shine,
Yeah.
because you're building a long-term career, a long-term relationship with a filmmaker, a director, a production company, a writer, whatever. So like really zeroing in and going for that's going to build your relationship so much further than someone's that's like, it's a small part. All right, I'll show up and do it, whatever.
Yeah, completely. And I'm
Yeah.
also curious how your mindset has changed as an actor now that you've been on the casting side of things. I know it certainly has for me. So like how has that changed for you looking at casting since you've cast short films and stuff?
Completely changed my perspective on casting. I was definitely, before I got to the other side of the table as an actor, I was so intimidated by the casting process. I just felt like these casting directors were like these like superhuman,
Yeah.
like just like gods, right? That like I was terrified to talk to,
Yep.
terrified to do anything. And then when you're on the other side of the table, you just realize, oh, they're just people and they're just trying to figure this out. They're just trying to put together the best project. And it's really not personal. It's
Yeah.
really not personal. And there have been times where, with casting a project, I have been heartbroken to say no to actors because, like, it's between like three different actors. They're all amazing. And you're just like, I wish I could cast every single one. Um, and then you just have to give the bad news. You have to break someone's heart. But
Yeah.
then but then you get to like make someone elated and overjoyed that they have this part. So, it's a balance, and I really feel the pain. I feel the pain of like turning actors down because I've been on that side.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like an indication that they could have done an amazing job. They just don't fit with the other actor,
Yeah.
or there's just so many things that come into the whole mix of things that it's really not personal. And I remember hearing that as an actor, and you hear it, but then when you really understand it on the other side, but the thing is, there's always, if you're an actor and you make a really good impression, you might not get cast in something in your first audition, but maybe like 5 projects down the line. For instance, one of the short films that I just directed this past spring, we had an actress in it that she had auditioned for 2 of our previous films and just was so close, but we just ended up going with someone else each time. And so finally, I was like, yes, let's bring her in for this. And so we put her in this one film. So it's just like the right project will come along when you're ready for it. And
Yes.
you just have to keep doing good work. That's it. Yeah.
Completely. I've had the same experience where I have always heard it's not personal, but it feels personal as an actor because I think you actors specifically in this whole grand scheme of filmmaking world, it's like acting is our identity and it's our person. It feels like it's your person that's being, but then when you're on the other side of it, you're like literally looking at like a height difference, or you're looking at like, oh, this person's available. I like these two together, but he's not available that day. Like you're looking at those details that just, and it's such a logical thing sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it really does change your perspective. And I've found that that has been helpful as an actor.
Yeah,
Um,
and a lot of it also really comes down to reliability.
mhm.
Um, Especially like if I've been working with an actor, if you work with an actor and they're not reliable or they're flaky,
Yeah,
I will think twice about casting them in another
for
project.
sure.
So it's like you could be the most talented actor, but if you're late, if you are like difficult to work with, it completely negates the talent
Yeah.
part of it. And I think for me it particularly is like that's a huge thing for me. Like it's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, coming from that actor standpoint where I've been on the other side and you're like, yes, I will do anything for this part. I will be here, I will there. You really show up and do the work. When you see it not reciprocated, there's
Yeah.
so much that you do as like a producer, as a filmmaker, everything to make projects happen. And it's crazy, but like, I mean, and this could be for it could be for a cinematographer, it could be for any position, but
Mhm.
if you're making the production more difficult because of, something that you're doing, that's going to count against you in the next production, because the producers will remember, oh, that person was difficult, oh, that person was disruptive, oh, that person was late, all that stuff. And it's
Certainly.
just we're juggling so many things that it is like, well, I just have to drop this person because they're adding in like a whole nother complication that I can't deal with, type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steven and I actually just got cast. We're coming to Florida for a period of time in the summer, and we got cast in this commercial, and the casting director was like talking to us about how she was having an experience where like, actors weren't turning in tapes, and she was like, I just needed people who I knew would turn up. And like that was where
Mhm.
she had gotten to in the casting process. And she had sent Steven like a Hail Mary, like, is there any chance in the world that you're in Florida this week? And he was like, actually, yes, there is. So,
Wow.
but like, and we had taken a class with her before.
Mhm.
I've never auditioned for her. I don't even know her outside of the class. But she told us specifically, just from my perspective, I just want to tell you that actors, it matters how you show up. And we had not even auditioned for her before. Just she said, I saw how you showed up in class. That's it. And
Mhm.
I just knew I could text you and you would turn in a tape. And so it really matters like who you are as a person, even outside of the casting room. Like just, Orlando's small. Like people know people. It matters who you are as a person. And I think that if you're not going to produce your own work, you're just going to, act, like that is a way that you can take control of your acting career to some degree, I think is like who you are as a person.
Yeah, and especially now when the industry is so slow. I remember years ago, I got this piece of advice from maybe a casting director, an agent, I don't know, a teacher, but like, don't give them a reason to say no, right? It's so easy to give casting a reason to say no
Yeah.
that you don't give that, like be reliable, be in person. And but it's so slow right now that, I think everyone had there's this boom where there was just so much available and there's so much work going around. So honestly, like it didn't really matter how people showed up because they just needed people.
Yeah.
Like they just needed people to be there. They needed bodies, they needed to cast. Now
Yeah.
the production has shrunk so dramatically, they're re-looking at that and saying, all right, who can show up? Who's reliable? Like all of that. So it's like the behaviors that I think got a free pass for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, like when there was such a boom, that won't fly anymore. And I think people are realizing that the hard way.
Yes, certainly.
Mm.
And I'm curious now, like, so you are building this, big thing in Orlando, which is so cool. And you're talking about, you're recognizing talents there in this market that is kind of unrealized. You
Mhm.
also were in New York for a period of time, like you mentioned, you're at Tisch. So talk a little bit about like how you've seen the industry change, like in terms of where you are in the world. Like it used to matter a lot, now it's not so much. Like a little bit about building a career in whatever market you're in, since you've kind of experienced these multiple markets.
Yeah. Oh, I think, when I first started out, independent filmmaking was less accessible, I think, just because of cost and like resources. And um, so independent film was really shaky, like especially like non-union stuff when I first was working in it. Um, but since then, it's just that anyone can really find a great camera, people with like ability to use it. Like there's just editing is so much easier with, everything being digital, pretty much everything being digital now, that the quality of independent film has just skyrocketed. It's just pretty consistently good. And you can make it from anywhere. You can film it, yeah, you can film it in Orlando, you can film it in New York, you can film it in LA, and I think one thing we are finding out in the industry is that people they're choosing where to film it based on being most convenient. And a lot of times that is cost. There's been a lot of reports that like LA has shrunk significantly in production. The US has shrunk significantly in production because people are filming more abroad. So it's everyone's kind of going for the most cost-effective way to make things. And for independent filmmakers, it's very easy to do. Like it's at your fingertips. Um, and you can, yeah, you can make things anywhere. You can submit to film festival. When I was at Sunscreen last month, I was talking to filmmakers from all over the place, and we were all screening at Sunscreen.
Yeah.
People that lived in Florida, people that were in New York, people that were, outside the US. Like there's so many different opportunities, and that you can take advantage of no matter where you're at. You can put stuff online. You can release things everywhere. I do think, that it is a challenge to find specific resources and communities based on where you're at. So, like, if you're in a rural village in Alaska, you're not going to have the same resources that you would in like New York or LA or here in Orlando. Like, you won't have the same group of people to like make the projects. You can still do it, it'll be harder,
Yeah.
but it's important to surround yourself with resources wherever that may be. Orlando is growing in their resources, and I like to think that All the Line is growing as one of those resources.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but it is, it is different. It is a difference because there are things where, like in New York, as you probably are experiencing, you can film something and you're like, oh man, I don't have this, and you can pick something up like right away. You down here in Florida, you might not be able to get that same thing that you need in like a pinch. So
Yeah.
it kind of really depends. You have more fluidity, but there's also higher cost. You know, when I was making independent films in New York, no one had a car. So like you had to
Yeah.
rent a van. You had to like in order to move equipment or anything, you had
Yes.
to rent stuff and like pick it up, and it was a whole thing. You had to have a specific person that was like literally hired just to go and pick up the equipment and drive the truck.
Yep.
Here everyone has like pretty much everyone has equipment because they have the storage space, you
Yeah.
know. Unlike in New York where everyone's in tiny apartments, so you're like,
Yeah.
I don't have lights because I can't fit it in my space.
Yeah.
You have vehicles, so you kind of find different challenges. You know, LA has a lot of talent and a lot of, you know, resources, but they're also very expensive. You have to pay a lot to get permits to film, even in your backyard. Like it's great. Like I've never filmed in LA, but what I've heard is just like, wow, I couldn't even think about putting those costs into production. So, so like there's literally challenges wherever you make films. You just kind of choose your poison, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. We, have made films in Orlando, and here we are in post in one film and pre in another. And there was a logistical challenge that I was like, oh God, yes, we do need to get gear to Brooklyn. But, we have somewhat streamlined our life in that like our lights, like our umbrella lights are our lights in our house. Like we don't have floor lamps, we have umbrella lights because we're like, we're not going to store these and buy floor lamps. So you do like kind of start to learn these things, and like we ended up paying Ubers for all of our crew to get, to certain places because we just couldn't. So
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. I do think it's pick your poison. And I do think I also have heard, like I kind of did some research way back, and I was like, okay, am I going to go to Atlanta? Am I going to go to LA? Am I going to go to New York or whatever? Because I had this idea of like I had to be in the right spot in order to be, active at all in the world, in the filmmaking world. But someone gave me advice of like, where do you, Brittany, the human, want to live? First and foremost, because it and that was like such a dumb moment for me, even though it shouldn't be. But we get so focused on the career aspect and where are things and all that, trying to anticipate like, is Atlanta over or is it just starting? Am I gonna go there and it's gonna die, And she was like, do you even want to live in Atlanta? And I'm like, no. No, not really, but like New York has been in my heart since I was a kid. Like, yes, I want to live in New York regardless of what I do. So like you kind of, I think, have to do that. Like think about you as a person first.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very true. Like I've known people that have moved to LA that hated it and moved back.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's kind of the idea that there's always everything's always going to be is it over no matter
Yeah.
where you're at. Whether you're in New York, LA, Atlanta, there's always going to be that question. There's always going to be people that are working in
Yeah.
any of those things. There are people that are dug in, and I know friends that are true and blue New Yorkers. They will never move. They are always in New York no matter what the ebbs and flows. You really have to love where you're at because you know there is that, you know, wherever it is, there is going to be ebb and flow. You're always going to be questioning, but at the same time, if you love where you're at and you love the environment, you're going to be happy. And
Yeah.
and that could change. You know, you could end up being like, oh, you know, you could be like, oh well, now I want to move to LA because I'm done with New York, or
Yeah.
maybe Atlanta is the right choice. And there is that fluidity of being like, all right, I'm going to pick up and go. You know, but because you want to be in that spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier, like that you got into this all because your grandpa, you saw him performing in community theater. Steven and I got to see you in your friend show, so we got to see you on stage. So I'm curious if you had a distinction like going into acting, like did you want to be on camera? Did you want to be in theater? And kind of you've now built this company that's around, on camera and films and stuff. So I'm curious how you've kind of navigated that.
I think I've always kind of I think I'll always go back and forth in my life between what do I like more, theater or
Mhm.
film, and it's probably just dependent on what I'm working on at the
Yeah.
moment. Um, Theater is my first love, I guess, and specifically classical theater. I wanted to just do Shakespeare when I like that was like my thing. If I
Yeah.
like doing classical theater, that was my goal when I first graduated college, and I did that for a while, but I realized it's not a very strong ecosystem to survive in to just do Shakespeare. It's a really tough, small opportunity world. So I started expanding, and I really fell in love with the movie making aspect. I love movie magic. It's just,
Yeah.
there's certain times where, I'm on set, whether it's in front of or behind the camera, and there's something that absolutely just makes my jaw drop of just, wow, that was absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And it's like you really do create magic um in film. But I mean, but stage is such a wonderful challenge for an acting. There's this quote I always go back to. I forget who said it, but it's, theater is an actor's medium, film is a director's medium, and television is a writer's medium. And I
Mm.
really think that's true because in television, you really have it about like the writer creating the script and the stories in the
Yeah.
writer's room. Film is all about the director's vision, but theater is where, as an actor, you're on stage. It's your performance. Like there could literally be nothing. You could be in a black box, nothing, and that is the show. So for the actor, it's always going to be theater is number one. But then I'm also a director, so I like film. So, and then, I also have the writer part. And so so I think many components, and I think it just really depends on um, what I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah.
That will
Yeah, that
change.
it totally makes sense. I think I have always said that I enjoyed the process of theater and the product of film because the thing about theater is like that's where I re-entered the world is, through theater and I had such an amazing time. And but then it's gone. And I'm like, I want to revisit that. I want to submit. So what I love about filmmaking is you have an asset at the end and you can submit it to festivals. Like you're saying, like we just got into a festival in Denver. It's not an actual physical festival, but it's in Denver. The company's in Denver. So like we could go there and visit friends and see our film again. And we can go here. And so I love the product of that, but there is something about the process of theater that just can't be replicated. I don't think in the filmmaking world where you're like in this little bubble for a long time with the cast before you share it.
Yeah.
You know,
I used to be absolutely devastated when I was like in high school. I was absolutely devastated when a production would end. Like
yeah,
I would be so sad because it was so extremely special, and you create bonds with people, especially in those transformative years when you're growing up, when you're in high school, and like everyone has insecurity, everyone's dealing with stuff, but like you're able to just like bond and just put all your gunk, on
yeah,
stage and like make something fun and just lose
yep,
yourself for a while. And I would be absolutely devastated when shows were over. And then as like I did more shows, you kind of learn, okay, this is just tempor, it's just it's not meant to last. You enjoy the journey and then you move on. You kind of, I guess it's almost, I mean, it's like a component of life, right?
yeah,
You learn, it's almost like you grieve the project, and you're just like, all right, these things naturally live and then they die and then you go to a new project. But yeah, the thing with film is it's like you
yeah,
always have that capsule of what you created. So it's that kind of immortality, which I think is why so many people are drawn to like film and television, because you have that performance captured. I mean, there's so many, like when you read about the great actors of like the past, that before film was invented, we never get to see their performances. We can only like hear about like what people wrote. And it's crazy to think, wow, like the best actor of like the 1800s will never see, we
yeah,
will, their performance is gone. They're just like spoke of as like this legend, right?
yeah,
As opposed to like we'll always know like what Meryl Streep's performance was, what Daniel
right,
Day-Lewis's product, what Denzel Washington's performances are, because we have them.
yeah,
But it's like but there's something almost beautiful about that. How you create something in theater and then it's there for a moment and then it's gone. And you
yeah.
just, you it's an experience for
It's
both.
fleeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do think I think that it is like something beautiful about that that it is a fleeting thing. But I also find that I take pieces with me too into the next phase, whatever I'm doing next. I have this. different energy, like, or more, it's more grounded, or it's more this, or it's more that, because I had that experience, so it stays with you in a different way. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's different.
it's like a challenge. Theater is, I've found it's always been, it's kind of ironic. It pops into my head because now I run, I do like half marathons, I do triathlons, I do a lot of things, and I just kind of connected in my mind like, oh, it's a similar feeling when you go on stage to do a show, when you do a theater show, especially if you're doing like, like a short play but if you're doing like a full-length play, especially if it's like Shakespeare, you start it and you're like, how? All right, I'm gonna do this. This is gonna be a literal marathon. Let's go for it. And you go on this whole journey, of emotional ups and downs, the stories, the scenes, having all your lines together, having all the block, like everything together. You do that for like 2 hours or more, and then you've made it through. And I guess it is similar to like doing a race. Like you prepare for it, and then like you have a half marathon, and like 2 hours later you go through all the ebbs and flows and you do it. So maybe that's something very revealing about myself. Like I love this epic challenge of like, will I make this through this crazy endeavor that I've said yes to?
Yeah, yeah, it's an endurance sport. It really is. Theater, it certainly is performing.
Mhm.
So, what's next for you personally, and what's next for you in all the line, like as you guys are looking forward, in the next couple of years here?
As I mentioned, we're gearing, we want to do our first feature, so that's like gearing up to figure out how that's, possible, and get funding, and gear up for that. As we're continuing to grow as a company, with our various projects, and as I mentioned, like through our development pipeline, not just projects that I'm really overseeing, but also having new teams of producers
Yeah.
develop and create their projects so that we just have multiple things going on. Definitely with all the line, it's increasing our funding, our fundraising. So we're fiscally sponsored through Fractured Atlas, which means we accept nonprofit, tax deductible donations. We're not a specifically nonprofit, which is what I would eventually like the company to become. It's kind of like our training wheels
Hmm.
into the nonprofit world. But so through that, getting donations, because another thing is that, with independent filmmaking, there's this kind of thing of like you want to get investors, but independent filmmaking, you really don't get that much of a return on things. So
Yeah.
like kind of what's the reality here? And for me, it's like, well, I want to call it what it is. And it's like if you're donating to this film, if you're giving money, you are most likely not going to get money back. It's just statistically not a thing. But the same way someone would donate to a theater company or a museum or an orchestra, in that way, that's the scope of what All the Line is about. Like getting people to donate and support in that way, where you're like, I don't care about making money back. I just want to make this project happen and support these artists and make
Hmm.
this happen. So that's one thing that, with All the Line, really working to get more donations and expand, all of the funding coming in. So,
Yeah.
and then, gearing up to be more of like a longer term nonprofit with solid roots and that 501(c)(3) status thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's an interesting way to put that, because that was one question I had for you, is how, you have a body of work in shorts, and are those shorts often like concept films, that you're going to go and make a feature with an ideal world, that feature would maybe go into a streaming platform. And, there's ways to make money as an independent film, but it is somewhat, I don't want to say hit or miss, but it's not like, on a studio, in a studio track, in a studio world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I think it's cool that you're.
Well, yeah, I think especially with the shorts, I would put that more in the incubator
Mhm.
aspect of the company than a studio, even though it is kind of more practically producing
Yeah.
things, because Yeah, shorts are more for like building like a proof of concept for like a larger feature or showcasing yourself, like growing your skills as a director, a writer, whatever, like expanding that. And then the feature is like the real entree, right?
Yeah.
That's like you really creating a really long story, and that it
Mhm.
can be that can be profitable. That can be, one thing is like I look at the format of like the Public Theater and like Playwrights Horizons and Roundabout. They're all nonprofit theaters in New York, but they
Yeah.
have shows that move from their workshops and off Broadway to Broadway. Like Hamilton is, for instance,
Yeah.
was developed in Public Theater, kind of in their incubator type of thing. And then it was a hit in that, and so they moved it to Broadway. That's kind of what I envision the scope of All the Line is we have
Mhm.
these projects that are incubated, and then we're like, all right, this is ready to make a feature, and you put it out there, and maybe it's a hit, maybe it's not, but it's kind of like create like, and you've done the work, you've done the development work, so you're like, all right, I know this is really good. We've put the work in. Let's make it. And so features can be profitable. It just really depends
Yeah.
on that it's particularly different genres are more profitable. I think like horror films are more profitable in the indie world. I
Mhm.
personally am not a huge fan of horror
Mhm.
films, so
Yeah.
that's like such a challenge for me, but I
Yeah.
also really like sci-fi, and sci-fi films are very, like, when they're done well, are profitable. So it's kind of like, I'm like, I'm picking my horse
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
But uh but then again, with All the Line, we are developing multiple different genres and projects. Like our next steps have been, we've had zombie comedies, we've had,
Yeah.
rom-coms, dramas, we've had a bunch of different things. So, it's kind of being like, well, this is a good story and we want to like develop the good story
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the story first is like that's what Steven and I always come back to is story because I mean, sometimes things start as plays, things start as short films, they start as I mean, Steven has these two books. One of them is going to be a play, and it's like you don't know where it's going to go, but if the story is solid, then yes, it might end up on Broadway. It might end up somewhere else, but like I think that is what you are doing such a great job of is incubating that story. Like testing it in front of audiences, like actually getting feedback on it and seeing, how it's being received. And then it has such a chance of going further than that because of that.
Yeah, exactly. It really does come down to story. And I think, that's one of our strong points of All the Line is we have a really strong writing base. We
Hmm.
have really strong writers, and so that comes across with the projects that we do.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
it is something where with members, if they'll send us a script, we're honest and say, hey, look, you're not there yet, but let's
Hmm.
give you some feedback and let's help you get there.
Yeah.
So it's being honest, and it's not what everyone would want to hear, but it's the truth, that okay, this
Yeah.
isn't ready yet for us to make or produce, but keep working at it, and these are the things you can work on, and you'll get there.
Yeah. I think we have all seen the product of echo chamber work, and it might feel good in the moment, but where it's like it's sent to a few friends or something instead of people who have produced a lot of things. And then it's like, oh, this is great. You finished a thing, or whatever. And then we see it and we're like, oh, yeah. So yeah, I think it's, and also you have such a collective of, I mean, it's literally the collective, but you have such a group of creatives where like I know as an actor, when I started writing, I was thinking, okay, if I was an actor and I got these sides, oh, the objective is not clear at all in this. But from a writer's perspective, I was like, it's this and it's that. And I was like deep into imagery and stuff. But then if I could put that hat on, I was like, there's no objective to the scene whatsoever. Like it's out. So like, you have that base of people who have fulfilled different departments, and then that allows you to like actually get feedback, I think. So that's a very it's a cool way of doing it.
Thank you. Will do.
Um, well, Kim, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on, the industry as a whole. I think you have done such a great job of navigating in terms of, coming from an acting perspective and moving into producing and directing. if you had some advice, some parting advice for a multi-hyphenate creative like us, who's looking at the industry in 2025 and being like, where should I focus my energy? What is it that maybe it's a mindset thing, maybe it's a practical thing. If you had some parting advice to give that multifaceted creator, what would it be?
Um, I would say follow your gut, like follow your passion. Because I found that by doing that, I've like found like a path along the way by just like chasing that white rabbit, of being like, this is what I want to explore, this is what I want to do. I'm also of the opinion that opportunities only last for a short opportunities can last much shorter than you could think they do.
Yeah.
So to really take advantage of opportunities and things that are presented to you. Of course, like you want to be able to pick your projects and you can say no to things, especially if you're getting red flags, but saying yes to something can lead you down the road to something like much cooler that like you had no idea, but because you did this like 10 projects ago, now you're doing this.
Yeah.
And so it's like explore the opportunities and the adventure of things and be prepared, be okay with going down a path and not seeing where you're specifically going.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're following what you're enjoying and kind of what you're interested in, and you're gonna figure it out as you go. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. Everyone, if you are interested in seeing what All the Line is creating next, or you want to support their art and their artists, you can go to the allthelinestudio.com, and we will also have all their social media linked in the show notes as well as Kim's social media. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was so great talking to you. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's been listening and watching as well.